Welcome to Volume 1 of my new series covering some of my favorite horror-themed Doom mods. This acts as a sort of sister series to the Surreal and Aesthetic Doom mod series, which covers a more general range of visually impressive and surrealist mods. I'll be showcasing a mix of old and new projects across gameplay styles and horror subgenres. I think that about covers it in terms of introduction, so let's just get right into the mods. Although it just got a standalone release, The Darkest Dungeon was originally made for and won the 2025 End Doom mapping contest. It's a single map UZ Doom project that draws heavily from gothic horror aesthetics, particularly the game Blasphemous. Right off the bat, we get some of that beautiful gothic and grimdark horror oozing from every corner of the map. The low fog rising up from the ground, the weathered masonry lit by flickering candlelight. There's some very nice use of low poly 3D models to accentuate the architecture and environmental detail, while still feeling like Doom. You pick up the first and only weapon right away, the Bastard Sword and Super Shotgun. Primary swings the blade while secondary fires the shotgun. Your sword will take out smaller demons in a single swing, which is important since these ghouls here have incredibly fast blood projectiles. The Super Shotgun seems mostly untouched except for having a significantly slower rate of fire. There's a bit of delay before it shoots, and I actually really like this decision. Despite being slower and ammo being incredibly scarce, the fact that the SSG is your only ranged option makes it invaluable while still pushing you to prioritize melee combat. If you've ever played Castlevania Simon's Destiny, you'll have a decent idea of how combat feels here. There are blood altars scattered around that heal you over time if you stand in them. The fact that their infinite use is a little bit overpowered, but they're far apart enough that it doesn't mitigate the challenge too much. The FromSoft influence here is very strong. I need someone to make a Kingsfield WAD at some point if it hasn't been done. There's a pretty limited selection of custom enemies here, but they all fit nicely into combat. The vanilla enemies are recontextualized against your new weapons enough that I never felt like it was lacking. This is a pretty solid boss fight, and it ends with a very direct homage to Blasphemous. The pixel art cutscenes look fantastic. They're such a nice addition that really add to how cinematic and polished this WAD feels. Cinematic is the word I'd use to summarize the whole experience. There's such a fantastic attention to detail in every little bit of audiovisual design. Plenty of WADs and games in general try to be cinematic without fully understanding how to tie that into a video game effectively. The Darkest Dungeon understands it completely. It has this way of drawing your eye and achieving beautiful composition even with a player controlled first person camera. The view of the wrecked shipyard from a small coastal town feels like it was taken straight from the pages of Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth. There's also something beautifully cinematic about the pacing here. The slow walk up the dirt road builds up a nice tension after the boss fight. Bits of the level are segmented by doors or walls of fog, and oftentimes there are areas built solely for pacing and building up the sensory experience. Having the music be replaced with the loud howling of the wind inside this cave is an excellent example of that. Everything about the sound design here is top notch, easily some of the best I've ever seen in Doom. I love how you can hear the rushing river grow as you approach the bridge before drowning out every other sound. The fog is thicker here as well, and you can see the hazy mist rising up off the rapids. If it's not obvious by my poring over every detail here, I really like this WAD a lot. The mausoleum is where the combat really starts heating up. Every area has its own MIDI tracks, and they're all absolute killers. This one's got some serious Sega Genesis Slaughterhouse vibes. I get the first keycard and the first soul. The souls are rare collectibles that power up your sword by increasing the swing speed. There's only 4 of them in the whole map. They're like Simon's whip upgrades from Castlevania. The simple weapon progression combined with the arcadey combat really reinforce the fact that it feels a lot like a first-person adaptation of an NES or Super Nintendo game. The foggy, barren landscape here reminds me of a Lucio Fulci film. I was immediately reminded of the painting from the Beyond. It transitions into the sewer section. I really appreciate how much each area sticks mainly to 1 or 2 colors. It makes each one unique and memorable. It's much more variety than you'd expect from a WAD of this scope. Grabbing the key here lets us finally open the courtyard gate to the mansion. Seems like a pretty big party is going on, but all the doors are locked, so I'll have to swing around back. There's quite a bit of short backtracking here, but it all works so well with how rich the atmosphere is. It also catches me off guard when the fountain area repopulates with demons. It throws an archvile at me, which nearly causes my first death of the run. I make my way back and enter the church that rose up out of the pitch black lake. If you thought the WAD was impressive already, the payoff here at the climax is even better. We're going full on Lovecraft now with the Cyclopean underground city. The monolithic spikes jutting out from above and below as you slowly descend, obscured by the thick fog just enough to make you question whether or not they're natural or man-made. The stuff is just so good. Enemies are being thrown at you in much higher quantity now as you fight through the hostile and bizarre architecture of the underground city, complemented by a haunting organ piece. It's bordering on full-on camp without being overindulgent. The final big battle gives me one last sword upgrade as well as the Berserk pack. Berserk causes my sword to shoot projectiles now, and it feels so good to use against this massive, almost slaughter-style horde of demons trying to block my path. If you feel like this ending is too abrupt, don't worry. The WAD has one last trick up its sleeve. Yes, this is basically just the final boss from Dusk, but it's awesome, so I don't really care. You get a nice little send-off after beating it too. Basically a perfect wad. The whole thing lasts a bit over half an hour, and it's just an absolute treat. I could easily play like 10, 20 maps of this. Easy recommendation to anyone. In an era where liminal horror has reached an absolute apex of cultural saturation, where you can find dozens of low effort cash grab games and videos trying to make a quick buck off the trend, it's refreshing to see just how earnest and well executed Liminal Doom 2 is. It's a 5 level WAD by Dashlit, made as a sequel to a project they had released 2 years earlier. The reason I'm skipping straight to the sequel is because I think most of what Liminal Doom 2 has to offer massively improves on its precursor in every way. The first one is still worth checking out, but the leap in level design here is noticeable right away. Map 1 opens up inside a huge empty living room. The moody lighting, muted color palette, and quiet music all pull you into the atmosphere immediately. I'm sure some people will be drawing comparisons to MyHouse.wad, but in all honesty, other than the fact that both projects draw from a similar pool of influences visually, they don't share that much in common. As you explore the first map, you get that slow sense of dread and discomfort sinking in. Levels are labyrinthine and illogical, but they somehow never feel frustrating or unpleasant to navigate. Exploration has that perfect balance of creep and curiosity as you make a mental map of the layout and figure out where to go next. There are no monsters in map 1, but I didn't know that my first time playing through, and every corner felt like it could be hiding something terrifying. I like the puzzles here for the most part, though I do have to complain about one. You're supposed to activate this moving floor while on top of it and then run across to the wall that opens up, but the spot to activate it and the timing to run back on it feels so finicky. I genuinely wasn't even sure if that was the intended solution after I solved it, but apparently it is. Map 2 pushes even further into the disorienting architecture. It's obviously taking from the back rooms, but the lack of jump scares or any overt horror elements prevent it from feeling cheesy or overdone. It also does a killer job of introducing the first enemy encounter. The difficulty options are simplified to just normal and hard. At least on hard, the challenge level is fairly high, with an emphasis on resource management and claustrophobic encounters. It occasionally relies on simple infighting, like this battle with the Shadow Cyber Demon, but this guy's health is pretty low compared to the normal Cyber Demon, so it's not too rough of an encounter. This WAD also has something I'll refer to as super secrets. Some maps have a gray keycard hidden away, and collecting it allows you to access an extra combat encounter. I really like that these secrets are used for optional challenges, so more casual players who are going for 100% completion don't feel like they're missing out on big rewards. The bonus fights are also much harder than anything else you'll encounter. These custom imps are an absolute hell to deal with. Map 3 takes us into the pool rooms. It's a nice change of scenery while still staying on theme. I get a bit more lost here than I did in the other maps, but visually it might be my favorite in the whole WAD. Some of these bathhouse areas are oddly relaxing to wander through. Meanwhile, others are much more gloomy and unnerving. The scope of the maps continues to impress as well. There's a whole area where you walk into an underground garden and explore a connected house interior. It feels like you're trapped somewhere absolutely massive, and this is only a tiny sliver of it. Map 4 is the penultimate level, and it takes another detour into purely puzzle and exploration territory. It fits in perfectly to slow down the pace before the climax. The bizarre, blacked out city kind of feels like something out of a Yume Nikki fan game. It's got a very relaxing song, and generally feels much more friendly and cozy than the rest of the WAD. Aside from a few frustrating platforming sections, it's pretty laid back, with a lot of fun puzzles, and it lowers your guard. There are certain special maps in the history of Doom that lurk in the depths of the canon. Maps infamous not only for their difficulty and scope, but for an almost intangible quality that keeps them gnawing away at the back of your mind. A map that lasts as long or longer than some entire WADs. A map that commands respect through fear, one that through a persistent and creeping hatred draws you in. It's a war of attrition between the line defs, a battle not won but survived. It's as if the map itself were alive, the demons merely pawns to the cruelty of the structure laid out before you. Level 5, Threshold, is exactly that kind of map. The entire sum of the WAD up to this point feels more like preparation for the true game, and longer than all the others combined. The starting section is fairly innocuous. I always appreciate a nice stretch of combat with the pump shotgun before you get the SSG. The heat slowly starts to rise as you fight your way through the building interior. A swarm of Revenants and Hell Knights act as the final welcome party before you enter the main area of the map. It's an absolutely gigantic city block full of buildings that can all be individually explored. The map has a total of 6 keycards that can be collected somewhat non-linearly. As you wander around, there will be closed off areas with seemingly no way to enter. Ammo is incredibly scarce for the quantity of enemies, and as you wander around looking for a way to progress, it's easy to get caught without the necessary resources to survive. Eventually, areas that you swear were closed before start to open up when you loop back around to them. I had no idea what was going on at first, but once I found my way to the central area and realized what the rhythmic ringing of the MIDI track sounded like, it all clicked into place. The core gimmick of this map is the clock, depending on what hour it is, which are broken up into roughly a minute and a half in real world time. Different areas across the map will open up. Some of them close after the hour passes, while others stay open permanently. Realizing what's going on and starting to mentally map out what correlates to each hour, along with hints scattered around the map to help you out, leads to a really satisfying and unique experience unlike any other map I've played. Dashlit recommends playing this on normal first, and I'm inclined to agree. My first attempt was on hard, and I genuinely reached a point where I was so resource starved I just couldn't progress. That's without even mentioning what happens on hard when the clock strikes midnight. Even on normal, this thing is an absolute bloodbath. My first attempt gave me a better idea of the layout and major weapon locations, so I could take a more calculated approach this time. The first major area I tackle nets me the plasma rifle, an absolute lifesaver for basically every other encounter in this map. Next up is an optional encounter with the Shadow Cyber Demon, but if you let the enemies infight, there are tons of resources to collect here. Right beside it is a pit full of imps and revenants that feels almost impossible without the plasma rifle. I managed to clear it out and grab the first of 2 mandatory keycards. After that, I venture all the way across the map to the area that made me restart last time. This fight requires you to be totally stockpiled, and even then I relied a lot on infighting to conserve ammo. On hard, the Cyber Demon is supported by Archviles, and it's such a mean fight to deal with. Now that I have the red keycard though, I can open up the main doorway in the town towards the exit. Doing so requires locating 2 switches that require fighting through nearby buildings to reach, and once the floodgates are finally open, As you walk to the edges of the map, the lights begin to shut off one by one. Slowly, the whole room is enveloped in darkness until there's nothing left but your own thoughts. This is the bad ending, the easier one to reach, and even then it was still a struggle to get here. The good ending requires a gigantic, interconnected puzzle across the whole map, including an area that is only open for a very small period of time before permanently closing. I'm honestly just not good or patient enough to have reached it on my own, but for those of you who want to dig deeper, I wish you good luck. House of Dead Skin is a single level WOD that almost immediately upon release became regarded as an all-time classic. It won a CAC award the year of its release, and in the canon of Doom mapping is considered a must-play. I consider Ivy a friend of the channel at this point, but I played this WOD long before that, and I've been planning on covering it since before this channel even existed. The first thing you're going to notice is that about 98% of everything you see is brown and beige. It's impressive just how much mileage Ivy was able to get out of an almost monochromatic color palette. Most of the textures here are vanilla too, and they're used in such visually interesting ways. The whole place feels like a blood-soaked hell map that's been left to rot for so long it dried up and hardened into leather. There's a lot of jagged and irregular shapes, bits of map curling in on themselves and jutting out like tendrils. It just adds to the feeling that this place itself is made of organic matter. The first encounter is also a fantastic starter, and it pretty much sets the difficulty right away. Fights range from cramped tunnels like this to wide open spaces, and it's fairly challenging without ever getting too sadistic. Mostly. I should mention I'm playing through this with the Mini Charge Plus mod by Tango. This is absolutely not the intended way to play, and you really shouldn't be stacking dehacked stuff together, but it was my third time through the map, so I wanted to spice things up a bit. Apologies to Ivy, and I'm sorry to all the Doom purists who follow my channel for vanilla-style coverage. I hope I haven't forsaken you with this. I just like how punchy and fast Mini Charge feels. You clear things out a lot faster without sacrificing too much of the balance. Anyway, once you've cleared out the first fight, the map opens up a lot. It's fairly non-linear and very large, but it all flows together so naturally that I never really got lost or anything. You can pretty much tackle it however you want, and there are quite a few optional encounters hidden around as well. The first major section I do is this huge fight in the lake full of poop water. Infighting here probably isn't necessary, but it does help a lot. The fights in this map are interesting in that they don't necessarily break hugely new ground, but each one is so incredibly well designed and engaging that I can instantly remember it off the top of my head. It's not often that I can immediately recall like 6 different fights from a single map, because they were just that much fun. The one immediately after this, for example, with a spider mastermind above a crusher that you can't activate yet, while the place fills with teleporting enemies. They'll run towards you, and once they reach the center tiles, they teleport back to the outside and start again. It makes monster herding more challenging, and you really have to watch where you're moving so nothing teleports behind your back. It gets extra scary once the archviles start flooding in too. The incidental encounters here are pretty nice as well, and they give you time to soak in the atmosphere. It bears repeating that the visuals here are just absolutely fantastic. The bizarre, curved architecture that loops back into itself is great, and it makes for wonderful exploration. We've got some more fights like the gigantic corridor with chain gunners on one side and archviles and revenants on the other, front-loaded with even more revenants ahead. None of these things pose the greatest challenge, though. The true challenge in House of Dead Skin is just how much it loves using the Pain Elemental. I seriously cannot think of a single other WOD I've ever played that has as many Pain Elementals as this one. This isn't even the meanest Pain Elemental fight in the WOD. How about this one right here you have to do while also trying to navigate tiny strips of ground to avoid the massive damage floor? I'm not joking when I say I spent a full 20 or 30 minutes on this fight. It's the hardest one in the whole level. Not all of them are that challenging, though. There's a nice little infighting one later on that's surprisingly straightforward and doesn't overstay its welcome. There really is almost every type of combat encounter you can imagine here. Having this much variety while maintaining such a high level of quality is really impressive. You get a bit of platforming before dropping down into a nice slaughter-style finale that really caps off the whole experience nicely. You even get a teleporter before the exit so you can go back and find any secrets you may have missed, including a great BFG fight I'll leave for you to discover on your own. This whole thing is killer, and I consider it essential for anyone interested in Doom. Thanks to anyone who stayed to watch, whether you're new or a regular viewer of the channel. I intend on making 1 or 2 Doom videos a month, in addition to covering what other games I feel like, so stick around if you want to see that. That's pretty much it. See you later.